the Dawn truck this morning. Mike,
Driving along that Elmo Fire on Highway 28, I see that fence has really been compromised, and it's a brand new fence, and it behooves us to have it fixed sooner than later, so it doesn't come apart worse. So I'm wondering, is anybody on that fence?
that's part of the bear stuff too. So,
Yeah.
we're
I was thinking
looking
probably.
at fences that are burned up and et cetera. Yeah. Talking about the Highway 28 fence. Highway fence is burned up pretty good.
Yeah, fencing will be part of the evaluation that when we can apply for funding.
Okay, you're up, 20. You got the other boys? Let's see who's on
Let
here.
me see, Pat,
There's
Steve,
Pat.
there we go.
Pat, Steve.
You guys go ahead and lead.
All right, sounds good. Well, good morning, everyone. We have a few people presenting. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen here. Is everyone seeing that?
We are.
All right, good deal. So I'm going to pass it on to Lyndon. He's going to start us off. Go ahead, Lyndon.
Lyndon, are you on?
You might be having some difficulties here.
Yeah, this is Steve McDonald. Lyndon was going to present a request from a tribal logger to modify their Sunny Slope 5 and 10 logging unit to extend the cut and pay date.
It's on mute.
It's on mute?
Yeah.
I'm on now, so go ahead, Lyndon.
All right, thanks.
Are you getting that?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, guys.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, excuse me. That's our Linden plant. I got a little something from a request from a tribal member logger contract modification for Sunny Slope 5 and 10. I think that's being shared on the screen. Just wanted to get your guys' input on that. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it or not.
So a little background here, council. This logger tribal member requested fairly early that she knew that finding haulers for her wood and the current fire season was going to be delayed in this contract. She's requesting to extend it from November or September 1st just to November 30th, just to give her a few more months to get the remaining wood off the site. We didn't feel like any penalty should be assessed as timing and resources to haul the wood off was not under her control. And also that the extension is not very long. She's just asking for a few more months to be able to clear the landing off.
Any questions from council? See none, there's action. Motion by Martin to approve the modification number 1 of the Sunny Slope 5 and 10 logging unit. Seconded by Bing. You need further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous.
Okay, thanks. Pat, what you have up next?
All right, so next we got James Lozo. He's going to discuss capital equipment purchase.
We're unmuted yet? Oh, we're still on.
Good morning, council. For what we have on the agenda today is the purchase of a lowboy for hauling our equipment. It's for our bigger 210 excavators and stuff. So we're just looking to get approval on the flowers auction at $39,000 is what we had quoted. It's down in Grand Junction, so we plan on heading out soon as we get approval.
Motion by Carol to approve the request for capital equipment of a lowboy. Question? Mike?
Thank you, Mr. James. You said it's a $39,000 item that you're getting where?
It's down in Grand Junction. We saw it online. It's a pretty good deal. It's a 2001 trailer. It comes with a drop hitch, so it's what we're looking for. We're looking to upgrade our trailers as well. So hopefully we can refurbish them and then, with Property and Supply, let another program have one of our trailers if needed.
Thank you.
Motion by Martin? No, motion by Carol, second by Martin to approve the capital equipment purchase of the lowboy haul equipment for forestry. Any further discussion? See none, all those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous.
So thank you.
All right, now, I have another request for approval for contract modification. This one is for 3 more logging. And it's the extension is going to be for the same amount of time till November 30th is when we're requesting. His reason is due to several factors. Loss of an employee, training of a new operator, late commitment of timber from TRL, and COVID amongst his employees. And we feel the same as with the other logger that we don't need to put any penalties on at this time.
This individual in this contract, unfortunately, TRL is its outlet for the pine market there, and TRL has been our loggers or all loggers basically on a quota per day, and hasn't really been taking that much wood consistently, which is hard for our loggers to find another outlet close.
Motion.
Motion by Carol to approve the resolution approving modification for Ferry Basin ITS logging unit. Second by Mike. Any further discussion? All those in favor, show of hands. It's approved.
So I have one more thing that didn't make the agenda. So I'm just wondering if you guys would be willing to make a decision on this right now about acceptance of bid for Boulder Line logging unit. If not, I could come back.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So this sale was sold last week. I think we had it on agenda for Thursday possibly. But we're trying to get that off the hill as soon as we can. If you would entertain looking at this today, that'd be great.
Motion, Mr.
Motion by Carol to approve the acceptance of the bids for the Boulder Line logging unit. Second by Bing. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Martin.
I think that we really need to make sure that departments are getting their things in to Jen as early as possible. So I'm willing to support this just because it's pretty straightforward, but let's not make this a habit. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well noted, Martin. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous.
All right, thank you for your time, council. And yeah, I apologize for that again. Have a good day.
Just one question on the TRL mill. When you're talking about commitment of timber, just explain that a little bit more to me.
So we sell the sales, the loggers buy them, and then the loggers are tasked with marketing that product off to different mills. Sometimes mills won't commit to buying a certain amount or won't commit to the purchaser at a certain rate until they have reasons to. And so sometimes our loggers have trouble finding outlets for the product because sometimes mills either have an influx of wood coming from another source and they won't commit to buying a certain amount of wood or won't commit to purchasing it at a certain price, which our loggers have to have a commitment of price to be able to meet their logging cost and way of living. So sometimes the stars don't align in that factor.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Martin.
What is yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Tony, what's the timber market like? I mean, are they still lower than they've been, or what's?
The regionally, we're doing good regionally. Locally, we're still in this, pattern of not following the regional prices. We have discussed it a lot with the mills, surrounding mills, especially after the gas prices went up. They have changed their prices slightly to include the logging cost for loggers because of that gas price and the hauling cost. But they haven't followed the true upward trend that the rest of the region has hit.
And it's pretty much, or Mr. Chair, for me, pretty much just because they have kind of a monopoly of this area, right? Because they have so few mills.
Unfortunately, yeah, I mean, we're centralized in all of them, and which used to be a great factor. But now we're having troubles finding good prices for certain products that are close, and other mills are just far enough away to where it's almost that same price points based on the hauling distance. And so we are working with them. Pyramid especially has been pretty open to conversations about looking at better pricing.
Good, thank you, Tony.
All right, I'll get out of your guys' hair for the day. Thanks.
Yep, thanks, guys. Pat, Stephen.
Thank you.
All right, Melinda, come on up. Good to see you.
Good morning, council. Today I'm here to get council approval for a project-specific agreement with the Montana Department of Transportation for an underwater bridge inspection, which will be on the steel bridge that goes over Buffalo Bridge Road on the Flathead River. And there's a map on page 15 that shows the location. And the inspection is going to be carried out by certified divers, engineers. I don't have an exact date when they're going to be there, but I know they want to do it soon though. It looks like September 2022 is when they want to do it.
Should I make a motion to approve the project-specific agreement?
Motion by Martin to approve the project-specific agreement for the bridge underwater inspection. Second by Carol. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, show of hands.
All right.
Approved, unanimous.
All right, I just have to come up and get your signature, Tom.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
That's an easy dive. You could almost snorkel it that time of year. Alrighty, now we're up to Chauncey. Go ahead, Chauncey.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Council. I am bringing forth a collection permit request from the Flathead Lakers to sample sites on the reservation, public parks, tribal parks for E. coli bacteria. I believe on the call, maybe Katie Sheridan from the Lakers or Amber Stanfield. This would continue to sample monthly by volunteers until September 2022. And if they do get hits of E. coli bacteria, I believe they're going to take certain samples that do get those hits to get eDNA testing to see where these bacteria levels are coming from, I guess the sources. This has been going on as far as E. coli bacteria for quite a few years, and the collection permits have been approved in prior council. Usually it's been through Mark Johnston with the swim guide, but they moved it over to the Flathead Lakers and they're taking over this year. So I am looking for approval of this collection permit. And I can take any questions.
A motion by Carol to approve the scientific collection permit to the Flathead Lakes, Lakers to do samples at the swim beaches. Second by Martin. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous. What happened to Mark? Did he retire, Chauncey?
I think, excuse me, it was just a little too much for him. So having this volunteer group from the Lakers do it, kind of, puts that out to everybody else and it's a lot easier. So I think he's still involved, but I'm not totally sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, council.
Okay, Whisper.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, council.
Hey, me? Unanimous? Go ahead, Whisper.
I am here today on page 22 with a new request for me, and I'm excited to be part of the process about asking for facilities improvements as part of a state tourism grant that was acquired through economic development. They contacted a group of tribal programs to see if there were projects that could fit under this capital improvements grant through the state of Montana, and economic development was successful in acquiring those funds for us, working with Lisa Schwartz and John Nice. So we wanted to put all of our projects in at once, which is why this is coming from me for all these different projects. If we could go to page 23. Let's go to page 24. Please. I submitted the capital improvements request mistakenly. I'm still working through procurement and figuring out how best to do this. But I think the information that you do need is the different projects that are being proposed. And if we can get approval for continuing the facilities improvements on these projects. I believe Lisa's on the call as well. The part that includes me and Todd Espinoza is the Blue Bay Campground dock repairs. We projected out around $5,000, and that's the little part that was available for us to try to improve the swim and boat docks in the marina. I have some pictures to share if anybody wants to look at those really quick.
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I guess Ruthie's in the room. So what you're doing is the grant's been approved. You want authority to start spending,
Yes, sir.
and that's the only action we need.
I think it's supposed to be the approval of the project and approval of construction on a tribal facility and reading through procurement.
Go ahead, Carol.
Motion to allow both of those to happen, to move forward.
Motion by Carol to approval of the improvements to the travel facilities and approve the capital equipment as needed from the grant funding for each of the projects. Second by Jimmy. Any further discussions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, Whisper.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Okay, Ruth, come on up. We're gonna have you and then we're gonna take a break. You got the easy stuff coming up. Okay, we'll break first. Okay. All right, well, I had to do that, so we'll take a quick break. Okay, we'll come back into session after our break. And we have Ruth.
That's quick.
That's quick.
Okay, so quick now. Okay, in your packet, and I apologize, realized after speaking with Jennifer that part of your packet had the wrong document. It was almost the same name, but my fault for sending the wrong one. So we'll. Correct, yeah. So we'll start off with your request to approve capital equipment and the modification 10 to total allocation. So that is correctly in your packet on page. It is on that page.
25.
Yes, the request for capital, we do not require any change to budget. It can be accommodated within. It's only $6,200. But it's for enrollment to purchase a new ID machine. They have been working on this, and the delay in getting to acquire it is not anyone's particular fault, but at final cost, it is over the threshold and it is past July 1st. So we do require your approval. Enrollment I would not think we should delay issuing IDs until October 1st. So we ask for your approval of that.
Go ahead, Martin.
Are these gonna be the same IDs, or is this gonna be like an upgrade so they can be used, yeah, are they upgrades or is it the same thing?
Upgrade like at a different,
Like a higher quality, printer?
that I could not answer, Mr. Charlo. They aren't, the current machine has issues, it appears almost every time. That's why they do need to replace. So that is all that I'm requesting. Cannot answer your questions about the type of ID that they're producing.
Any other
And-
questions?
The equipment has to be vetted through IT, so Crystal Reese is the one that forwarded this to me.
Motion by Martin to approve the capital equipment request for enrollment to purchase a identification machine. Second by Carol to approve the capital equipment purchase for the ID machine for enrollment. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous. That did remind me of the one thing I think Sonny Boy brought up about the expiration on ID. I can't remember what it was, but we ran into an issue with that. I haven't talked to Lawrence about that at all.
I believe if I remember correctly, that was a requirement, by the state or feds that they have to have expiration date.
Okay. Go ahead,
Better
Ruth.
check mine out.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, so approval, was that granted?
yes, unanimous.
Thank you. Okay, and then the next item will be modification 10 to the total allocations. So as you can see on the resolution, some of the highlighted changes are going to be where we need to increase the water compact. Oh. What am I looking at, Jen? The modification 10. Yeah, I'm just looking at, this is the one. Okay, this isn't, but this is my last thing, the document that's up, sorry. You got me, Martin. Thank you. Oh, yep. Did that. Okay, cool. Yep. In the water compact, the program, actual costs that they need to finish the year needs to increase by that. And the majority of those increases are coming through compacts, contracts, and grants. Have some increases to those functional areas. And we'll pull back a little bit in the general fund and reallocate into the dedicated trust for a net increase of 0. Total change will be the 6.8 million and will now be at a total allocation of 293.9 million.
Motion by Carol to approve budget
No. Question,
question, go ahead.
Ruth, so if there's a cost of living, is that just come out of their regular
If they've been,
current budget?
okay, fiscal 22, we didn't have a cost of living. There wasn't a cost of living approved to my knowledge.
No,
oh, excuse me, go ahead.
no, this coming year,
Okay.
isn't this for this next fiscal year?
No, we're still in 22 on this modification. This is a
Oh,
mod to the current year.
Budget mod for this fiscal year.
okay, sorry, apologies.
We'll have that answered for you in a few minutes. So yes, that's the requested modification. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Motion by Martin to approve budget modification 10 to fiscal year 2022. Second by Mike. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous.
All right, everyone see that? I feel like every time I come to a Zoom meeting, I got to relearn. Okay, I want to just briefly recap where we're at. As some of you are realizing, that budget development is a process. It seems like in the old days, in the first years I was doing this, we could come in and do everything in just one, probably hour at the most. Of course, there's lots of work leading up to it, but at the stage we're asking approval, we would kind of come up and, oh, sorry. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I know, I was wondering why, I just said it every time I use Zoom. Why am I looking at this?
Welcome to my world.
These old dogs. That we had come to last month, had started off talking to you about tribal appropriated. That's the one, of course, you have, 100% discretion. We'd asked you to divide those, I guess, types of appropriations by the permanent designation, the mandatory, and the discretionary. And this is helping finance to further classify and manage those funds in accordance with those designations, especially for liquidity, long-term investment, if there's that potential or need. So that was also stepping you through kind of the major decision points that if you adopt them, they will kind of set the stage for the future. And you don't have to keep returning to these same questions and decisions, except to decide the when and the how much. The other thing that we had advised you of is what was totally available in tribal appropriations, and that after budgets came in, we were a bit above that. We don't think that that's a deal breaker, but it's something that will have to further manage. We also advised that we had about $1 million of new requests that are not part of your currently adopted priorities, nor were they coming through tribal program priorities in their work plans. And so those are the discussions we're going to continue with you next week when we revisit tribal appropriated. So today we get to have you deal with non-tribal appropriated and, looking at, what is that? Well, it's funds that we receive or we've generated, such as third party. So you're merely making available what you have or you expect to have. So it's either going to include all reserves or it's a combination of projected and what would be in reserve. And looking at kind of the first one to begin with is third party. When you review your audit each year, third party is in general fund. So it sounds like it's tribal, but because it's restricted to use, we like to further carve it out and have separate discussion. It's primarily going to be utilized by tribal health and the two other programs actually. One is home care providers that come under DHRD, and then justice and mental health collaboration, which is overseen by defenders. So looking at third party is, I couldn't even give you a very precise estimate The last time we looked at it, it was well over $40 million. So it's been growing quite healthily. They are on track to collect about 17 million this year. Mr. Derglo at Tribal Health says that his general goal is to have a total third-party budget that does not exceed what they are actually collecting. So that would preserve that reserve and be available then for the future. So you see the total of requests there by program. Pharmaceutical is going to go up a little bit. Obviously, the cost of drugs. This purchases the drugs that are then dispensed through the pharmacies. So that's just the purchase of drug supply. Deferred services is remaining at its same level. This is when the services for the patient cannot be approved through purchased care. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And so they collect up what they can shift to that and spend that for that. Justice and mental health, small increase. The supplement for tribal health, this is where they are spent up all of the available compact funding at the current level, but they still need more to maintain current level. So they are needing to obviously increase that supplement for staffing increases and operating costs. Provider relief came down through CARES Act, and we obviously spent what was available, so that'll just de-obligate and not be present in 2023. So the total of all of that, 16.6 million, 2.1 million change from current year allocated. Have any questions about that?
Go ahead, Carol.
And I don't know if you can answer, but the 500,000 has been consistent across the board for years. And so I'm wondering, what level are they approving at? And should there even be a level with that kind of money in reserves? Because I don't know, what's being disapproved, but I hear it once in a while, well, I've been disapproved, or, and I'm like, well, what for? It's maddening to think people are suffering because got that kind of money sitting around. It's just, and I know it's for rainy day, but most of these people won't make it till a rainy day if they don't get help.
That's an excellent question. My understanding, and this is should be confirmed and clarified by Mr. Derglo, is we use the fiscal intermediary for claims adjudication, and they are built to simply process according to the set thresholds or types of service. So if that system is going to regard this as, non-emergent, non-life-threatening, then they have to kind of figure out how to still get it through that. So deferred tends to be ones, and I just say this generically, if a person has a presumed eligibility for a resource such as Medicaid, that's an automatic denial. An example of that is a pregnant 18-year-old. They go for their first visit. The system just says, you should be eligible for Medicaid because you're under 21. Or other, situations where there's a presumption of eligibility, Medicare, VA, something. And so those take some work. This is what I've understood for quite some time. It's that FI system that they use. You're absolutely correct in that we've not spent in any year that I'm aware of the total funding that we're awarded. So we accumulate a balance. Takes a few years to reconcile each of those years to make sure it wasn't over obligated. It was not. So eventually funds are made available to carry forward to future claims. I've asked Mr. Derglo to do that reconciliation by fiscal year, which would begin fiscal 17. Understood it was completed. And I had, just conversationally said, you need to keep, the leaders apprised of how purchased care is going forward, because those are the things that continually come back to them as way of patient impact, as you just described, either denied service. In my simple thinking, if a patient is ever denied and we know they are eligible for direct care, paid care, it should go to deferred as just a matter of process.
Okay, the other question is then, where does treatment fit in here?
Addiction treatment is now, to my understanding, all in IHS compact. And we will see what that's looking like here in a couple
Okay,
minutes.
so that then they can, they can actually go to treatment. There's actually
They
money
are.
set aside.
They are
Okay, and the
now.
last question is chef.
Mhm.
Do you see that money coming in or covering some of the catastrophic costs that we have? Or at one point, nobody, well, not, I shouldn't say nobody. The director did not, or the department head did not know about it, and, but he's now gone. But are they, are you watching that to make sure they're turning in claims?
They do have to manage the catastrophic cases as part of paid care. They have to, the way it had been done successfully in the past was they dedicated pretty much a person to that. And we do receive, when they're eligible cases, that reimbursement comes back to us through the compact. So I am aware of what gets paid actually. It doesn't address what are actually the threshold cases that they actually had to pay. The first thing that has to happen is they have to pay for the cases because chef is a reimbursement. And I have not seen any chef come back this year. So it doesn't mean that they have not submitted. It just means I haven't seen any at this point.
And I know the money does run out at the end of the year, so we gotta be on top of that. In order to get-
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's a finite amount appropriated by Congress. It's one of the big increases that tribes asked for. I think they are asking for 54 million this year. And just to date myself, when I started here 21 years ago, it was maybe a third of that nationwide. So it was one thing that we've kept our eye on. So thank you for those questions. So in the compact, moving right into that, as we know, we're in a multi-year agreement. We have annual amounts available. And this is what we call the base and recurring programs. To answer Ms. Langford's question, addiction treatment was being covered in priority services. This is something that was initiated under Teresa McDonald when she was working there. And it was just this priority areas of service that had been identified. One of them was addiction treatment. Another was alternative medicine. I mean, those sorts of things. And this has kind of gone along at this same level as well. Although Mr. Durglo requested the current year to go to $1 million specifically to cover the continuing cost for inpatient treatment. I then reminded him that he had recovery funds that were awarded last year of over $2 million and that it was identified for behavioral health and treatment. So they will start tapping that fund this year and we'll continue with that next year. So in the compact, as again, I said, these are the amounts made available. Environmental health, this is one, it looks kind of, well, it looks like they lost about $100,000. This is one that I know is going to adjust upward at the end of this year. So I'll get to give those, that program its available dollars for 23. It's just at this point, I can't base it on anything because we've not gotten our final shares for that function. Injury, that's the set amount determined by the facilities methodology. M&I, same, it's based on our supportable square feet. We are just under 100,000 square feet. Once we finish Ronan, we will increase and be over that amount. Unfortunately, we don't automatically get M&I for every space that we build because their formula will only let us have supportable space for our user population, which is not going up. So it's then tribal priority to build and maintain facilities and then have the resources. So that's where that reserve of third party and unspent prior year compact will help us do that. Tribal health, this is like all direct care, the pharmacy, the dental, everything going on in what we call the THD. And they are staying very close to what their available amount was. And they're decreasing because this year we let them go pretty far above their annual awarded funding and use reserves. They've determined they want to stay closer to what the funding is available and then shift the increase to third party. Paid care, this is an amount, it doesn't change. Another one of those, you know, we say, well, we need more. Well, the amount appropriated by Congress then distributes to each of the 12 areas. Our area gives us our claims experience allocation. It never goes to true need or actual need. 12.4 million. Priority services, again, this is an additional amount that's made available for those priority services. Indirect costs, I calculate that when all the budgets come in and it's on just the program expense that we can assess that for. Paid care doesn't come in there because that's almost like pass through to the vendors for those services. And we don't incur all of that effort, so we don't get to count that for indirect cost assessment. So total budget will be 27.78, slight decrease from the current year. When I actually come in and ask you to approve, you know, for real, the total, it's going to be more than this because we're going to give spending authority to programs that will carry over. So the non-recurring programs that were awarded, some of those might be in environmental health projects that housing is overseeing, and maybe another couple of programs under CARES Act or ARPA that the department continues to spend. IA, I've shortened that to Indian Affairs. We used to just say BIA, but that's not completely accurate. In our actual compact now, we have, of course, all the Indian Affairs programs that you're familiar with, like forestry and real estate and social services. But it also includes now this like safety of dams. It's always been in there, the 477 program, the TANF, you know, all of that that's in that. And then also trust funds administration, such as IIM and appraisal. So I thought it's probably easier and less words to say Indian Affairs Compact. So we believe in base programs, we get just over 10 million. Then we'll get increases to that for contract support, calculated need, and a couple of other things like the actual IIM funded compact that comes from trust funds administration. So we believe that the requested increases here, we have to call your attention to. We don't get any significant increases in BIA or the Indian Affairs dollars. The program amounts have been established a long time ago, and it goes to what we're performing for the federal government, the functions, if you will. And some of those are formula driven, like law enforcement, still doesn't comport with what we spend, or the actual amounts available in really any of those programs. So we told the congressional staffers, you know, if we actually could get increases for even inflation, you know, we've sat at many of these amounts since the beginning of the compact in 1994. Our base increases this year, including pay costs, is just over 100 and, gosh, I did that table and I can't remember what it said. It wasn't much. But it was less than 2% of the total funds awarded in operation and maintenance programs. So to think that even the minor increases we've gotten can meet, you know, pay increase costs, operating costs, especially now with inflation, it just doesn't happen. So nonetheless, 3 programs requested pretty big increases. Predictably, I'm gonna just call the second line there, social services. They are sitting currently just under $1 million, giving them every available dollar in the compact for that function that's been identified as social services or child welfare. They were given a target of, you know, that 5% increase. They came in at 1.4. And so we went halfway to that and we proposed 1.2. The sustainability, as I said, for increases is what our main concern is. If we can't sustain it with compact funding, then if you determined you still needed to do this, well, now we're going to look for tribal funding. So now we see how precious the tribal funding becomes when we not only are running the program on federal funds, we now have to supplement with tribal. 477, that amount is actually going to be requested to be appropriated at a little over 4 million because that's what their annual awarded funding is. I'm just showing the amount in our base funds that go into that. It's a little over 286,000. All of the other programs will carry forward with requested increases, or that we requested to meet pay costs and operating costs. The next one is tribal lands, currently sitting at a little over 1.5. They wanted a little over 2 and wanted to add quite a bit of staff, wanted to begin building succession lines for their critical positions. We again propose that you reduce that to 50% of the increase and go to 1.8. Scholarships is remaining the same. Visiting with the program, they average funding about 200 students a year. That's not changed a lot. They have pretty effectively been able to serve every eligible student that has the unmet need. Not every student gets 5,000, that's the max, because they don't have that level of need. So we're happy to report that. And I hope you're not hearing that people are coming in saying they didn't get higher ed assistance. JOM is a base set amount, never changes. It's based on actually a student count from the 90s. One of the perpetual things that tribes asked to be changed for reality, and the congressional appropriators have not met that need. The IAM program is a separate agreement through Bureau of Trust Funds Administration. They fund us for only 2 positions, but we staff for 3. It's our determination we can make available that additional amount beyond what we're funded. Tribal court, as you know, going up quite a bit. They are requesting new positions to stand up the drug court and also just to keep up with current workload. Law enforcement is the third one that asked for a pretty big increase. They're sitting at 2.6. They wanted 3.1 and we're proposing 2.8. Fire lookout is base funding that comes down for the only BIA facilities left that we have are the lookouts. And they get an annual amount for the upkeep and maintenance of that. And the program actually, you see 72, but I'm saying it's only going to be 12. 12 is the annual amount. 72 is what's accumulated because they've not spent their annual amount, which is their question to answer, not me. Forestry holding steady at the amount that is made available. They are going with the increase we provided, staying at or arriving then at that 1.6. The one amount we'll add into this is just under 2 million for indirect costs. Again, I calculate that on the assessable. So when I come in and also add in spending authority for carryover programs like dams and all of those non-recurring things that we're funded for. This one, I know there's a lot to cover in there. How do you feel about our proposal on those areas of increase for the social services, lands, and law enforcement?
Comments?
Oh, we're trying.
So the IAM, I just want to go back to that
Sure.
one. That's 3 positions are needed for that,
Yes, we're
Is it-
funded for 2, but we run with 3.
but it's pretty much a defined customer base, right?
Yes, it is.
But you've been doing it with 2, or we've been doing it with 2
Mhm.
for how many years?
At least a dozen years. We started off, we only had 1, and we fought really hard to get a second one. We have a pretty heavy workload because of our minor accounts. There's 1,700 minor accounts. So every year we'll get the little wave of the 18-year-olds on up through 21. And then the continual, I'm an account holder. People like me, like, can I request some money? Yeah, I am next to them and they do a fair amount of work, pretty continually. And the other thing that we're trying to cure is our records management. We've got lots of hard copy files that we've kept in our possession. There's fiduciary standards on those records. And Vern could tell you, from his time, said, yeah, there needs to be some effort put on managing that. So that's the primary reason we've kept, that 3rd position in place, is to begin to work. And it's not filled right now. So they are, going along. I think they're getting ready to fill it. So that's the best I can answer. If you'd like Greg to flesh that out, I'll have it.
That's good enough, Ruthie. Thank you.
Sure, yeah.
Any
So
other
I'll
questions,
second.
comments? Carry on.
Okay, all right, water compact. Oh, I love this one. The only one where we don't have to wonder if there's any money coming. This one though, because of the way we're asking the compact to roll, mostly to meet their reporting requirements and also to be in compliance with the statute. So we have two programs there called Section 7 and Section 8, and they're named that way. They comport with the statute. And we then ask the programs to come forward with their budget requests. And this time we got smart and said, well, we're going to add a contingency because we know it seems like every year we learn a bit more and we want to avoid coming in frequently asking for adjustments or something. I think it's just prudent to keep this rather streamlined and not any more attention put on it than needs to be. I think $40 million is authorized, that you will say, we will make that available. I could not foresee we'd come in and say, well, we were off by 10. That's what I mean. How is that gonna look? I mean, it kind of bespeaks that things were sort of, not well thought through. So this is what we're proposing. You see in Section 7, that's the rehab and betterment. That's almost the total amount that they're projecting for the individual projects that they have planned for 2023. And, as you all know, a lot of the work is very compressed schedule. They have to accomplish when it's not irrigation. This year we had a $16 million budget and they were very, very slow to spend much of that. Things just did not develop as fast as they needed. Mitigation, this is another one. It's called settlement. When you see your audit report and it'll say settlement fund and you think, settlement, when did we get a settlement? So obviously years and years ago when the mitigation settlement, and Chairman McDonald could probably really quickly and much better describe how that went down, but those funds that have been awarded is what were then planned for by Natural Resources to accomplish the mitigation. And the annual escrow payment, which is the FWIS, what's called Fish and Wildlife Implementation Strategy. The operator of the dam has to pay that annual escrow by the end of July. So I understand they paid just over $2 million this year. And so that's accumulating in the escrow. And the other amounts were also settled amounts, and we're spending the available amounts in accordance with their work plan. You approved that work plan a couple of months ago. So their budget request is totaling just under $4 million. FWIS, as I said, is implementation strategy. That's the big one, comprises the most programs and staff. FSSRP is the fisheries stocking supplementation and reintroduction. I'm gonna look all these up. WHR is wildlife habitat restoration. So those are the major categories of performance that they will plan to do. In the Clark Fork Superfund, that is a settlement for the Atlantic Richfield Company's Clark Fork River damages. So we had obtained mitigation, properties, and we now are simply planning for the operation and maintenance. So some of it might just be, there's a little bit of staffing in there, but it's the annual maintenance of those properties. I have not yet received their budget request. By the time I ask you to do the official approval, we'll have an amount in there of probably similar to what that amount is there.
Ruthie, question. We
Yes,
did get a settlement from BPA for managing the BPA acquisition lands similar to that one. Is that going to be expressed the same way?
Yes, it would be. For the fund accounting purposes, we would have that in the fund, settlement area. Our main concern in the audit, and it's not our main concern, but federal funds, because we have to do the schedule of expenditure of federal awards, and that has this whole layer of stuff that is addressed through that. So yes, settlement and proprietary is always setting off as, these are funds the tribes manages and administers, but they're not subject to some of that or any of that reporting requirement. Spending authority in your proprietary fund. Proprietary means that we're operating these more like business and not as government programs. So they're non-appropriated. You're not appropriating any tribal dollars to this, but you have to authorize them to spend. So the first one being early childhood daycare. They obviously collect for that. And so we ask them to project what they will collect and then propose to spend no more than they expect. Again, I did not receive their request for the coming year, but we'll get to that before final approval. Quicksilver submitted their budget, quite a large increase of almost $1 million. The way it's set up in our accounting is they may have that, but if they, again, are not actually receiving the dollars to spend, then they don't have it to spend. So they will not go over. Grey Wolf Park, a small increase. That's for site management of the former Kariakan trailer park across from Grey Wolf, under management of economic development. Tribal credit, they are just under $1 million currently, and I'm awaiting their budget submittal. That's all of those. Okay, here's one. Couple of programs we're gonna just ask that you consider. We no longer do a carryover of their unspent money. This happened long before my time. It probably happened because in the first years of the compact, in kind of undertaking and getting started, so to speak, we probably didn't spend our annual amounts. And so there was, quote, carryover. And say you were looking at your Johnson O'Malley and said, well, we had 88,000, we only spent 10 because we just kind of getting going. And so it didn't seem probably correct to just take that away and make them start over. So JOM was allowing carryover, road maintenance has allowed carryover, and the base amount funding job placement training in 477 was getting carried over. And I guess my belief is that because we are now increasing base programs like social services, lands, and law enforcement, as that, and they don't get to carry over. So they get their allocation, and if they don't spend it, if they needed it, it was there. But if they don't spend it, no, they don't get to carry it over. And they don't get reduced in the coming year. We're just simply trying to kind of tighten things up, make sure we continue to accumulate any kind of a reserve so that we can sustain these increased program budgets into the future as long as possible.
So
you can-
it'll just be a reserve fund.
yeah, it becomes what we call the unexpended reserve,
Is it-
and that's unrestricted.
Is it all put in one pool, or is it
Yes,
identified per?
yeah, it's, if I was to show you the fund balances, you'd be able to see what was in there and know that theoretically any of those dollars could go wherever. But as I said, because we're over allocating, meaning we're going ahead of what we expect to get, it has to come from reserve. JOM, I've spoken with every single department head in there since I've taken this job. I said, it does not seem correct that your carryover is almost as much or exceeding your annual funding. I said, that means your schools and your parent committees are not spending, which means there's not services. So they've done really well to really slim that down and really work with the parent committees to get their programs ready to go. I think Michelle is going to have conversations with you, but I alerted her to this. I said, I'll let you go through 2023, but that gives you a year to kind of get things going and get the parent committees really moving on these things. I said, it's not that much money is the thing. It just seems kind of strange. Road maintenance is another one. They get an annual funding, and this is just for maintenance. Remember, it's not transportation. It's not construction. It's snow removal, some, what do we call it? Little bit of blading, little bit of, you know, look at that budget, it's not much. I think they contract some of that to housing to do in home site areas. This can only be done on the reservation road inventory. So they're limited to that. They are currently at 265 and we want to freeze them there. If they don't spend that, then they're not going to get to carry over. But again, the theory, if you didn't spend it, then you didn't need it. And we won't reduce you, but yeah. DHRD, same thing. They are accumulating millions of dollars. They are now at 9.5 million in 477.
Go ahead, Martin.
Backing up just a little bit on the road maintenance, could that be something that we could use to help elders in the winters, as far as like getting gravel on their, if we have an ice storm, getting gravel on the road, that kind of stuff? Is that
Not in their driveway, but if it was a reservation
an
road
upgrade road?
leading to.
Okay,
Yeah,
That's
could
why
be a system
elders,
road.
yeah,
Gets pretty close to their place, so.
yeah. It's kind of like, yeah. Some of them live quite a bit out and would help. Again, 477, their annual total of all the program funding is just over 4 million, and they are sitting at more than double that because they keep carrying over unspent. And it has to be done here for like their childcare, their TANF, because that's federal funds. It can only go there. So we can't reallocate and spend elsewhere as a tribe. But this amount, because it's based in Indian affairs, we can put the brake on and say, well, if you did not spend that, you're not carrying it over. I don't know if it's reduction in actual client caseload or why of that. I've talked with Patricia a little, just kind of noted, I said, not only were you carrying a lot of carryover year to year, but now you've added in CARES Act and Rescue Plan Act to that. And that's been, some of it have been very slow to spend. So I don't think they will miss this little bit of carryover that they might have. I understand they are proposing to go to a 5-year 477 plan. In that 5-year plan, all of those other federal dollars can keep going forward and available to spend, but they have to separately report how they spend current year funding and how they spend carryover funding. So
Mr. Chairman?
they get to have that.
Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, I think it's time that we find out who's losing out on services, or has there been a reduction in cases like you said, or something's going on, but if it's reducing services to the membership because you don't have enough staff or whatever, it's not right. So we need to find out what's going on there.
And they have to annually report the number of clients that they serve and the categories of service, like if it was childcare, TANF, so on. So I would hope you're receiving that information.
Yeah, unless policy has changed and it's changed and that's what's created this.
Mhm,
But yeah, something we need to know
mhm,
where we're losing or who's losing, or
mhm.
if we're such good managers that we're just doing a great job and this is the outcome.
Yeah, it's, as I said, much more than just numbers on the sheet, in my opinion. And finally, the last little note, just like with the tribal appropriated, so we present to you the total available and what we reasonably believe is, really all that's available. And of course, we budget pretty much all of it to spend, except what's in reserve and needs to remain there in some way. When you enact the non-tribal appropriated, any actual increase would have to come because we have more funding to appropriate, or there's more revenue available, or maybe I miscalculated reserve. I don't know, anything of that sort. But to say there has to be more available to add, or we simply have to reallocate the budgeted expense. And this is when in Indian Affairs Compact, if it gets pretty tight and things are going far ahead of where we even start, that's the conversation we would have later. Say, well, we cannot make a bigger pie, so we'll simply change the divisions of that. Kind of the next steps. So this is your first kind of look at it today. I told you yesterday it was an appetizer. You just get kind of have a few bites and get your appetite ready. And we'll come back next week. I have to do a request with Jennifer, of course, either Tuesday or Thursday, as your schedule allows. We'll ask for an hour and then we'll go back and begin with tribal appropriated. Let you make kind of some final, not final, nothing's ever final. We hope would be final or close to final. Any further discussion on your decision to appropriate tribal, which is your general fund and your dedicated trust. And the last document to share is that, how do I do that, Jen? I go back to here. Nope. Chat. Oh, the table. I'm sorry. I had it there too. Can you do it, Martin? Thank you. I should put my glasses on. Okay. So what we just went through in super fast fashion was the gold shaded. So here's the columns. I was told a long time ago, don't give people columns and spreadsheets. It's awful. I said, I know, I work with them all day. So I said, talk to them and give them words, then show them the numbers. And so these are all of the numbers we went through. And remembering the permanent, mandatory, and discretionary, virtually everything we talked to you about is either in mandatory or discretionary. So, and then dividing out amongst the functional lines. So the roll up total now getting up to 178 million, including that tribal. So as I said, we'll come back and do the tribal piece next week and revisit some of those decision points. As Carol had asked about cost of living, because we've adopted pay scale, we no longer are in the cost of living, I guess, part that we used to be in, where you'd be asked to consider allowing that pay scale, because it's a survey-based methodology. It's going to already be included. So if they're surveying a particular occupation and those rates now, as compared to last year, are up 8%, then that's that comparability factor that already would have included cost of living by those employers. So as pay scale gets updated, which I understand happens in July, programs, again, still have to fit those pay raises or merit increases in their allocated budget. We're not going to come back later and add it in. We said, this is why we do all of this up front. It's your request within the target that was set based on available funding. I don't imagine there will be too many outliers that will require special attention. As soon as we get to those, we'll let you know and ask for action on that. Does that answer your question, Carol, about the cost of living? Okay.
It says total general fund to transfer from reserves.
Oh, thank you for
So
noting that.
what is left in reserves when you have that kind of money coming out of?
So general fund is our treasury. Treasury is all the trust-based revenue, the big ones, the dam, 18 million annually. And then next would be stumpage and leases and any other trust-derived income, Fundo 2, and then all local revenue. That's the fees and the permits and the sales and the all of the various fairly minor activities, but they do total up to over $1 million or more a year. So the general fund is that to begin with, and corporate dividends is the big player there. Corporate dividends, we advised you earlier in the revenue part of budget that corporate dividends is really playing a key role now. And now gaming becoming extremely significant, because if we're looking at the total appropriations of over 66 million, we have to be very dialed into, well, where is it all coming from? So this year alone, corporate dividends, because of the current year and last year's receipts from the corporations is growing, and that is a good thing. We've seen a continual flat of stumpage. I think we've told this council and prior council, stumpage, we don't ever expect is going to get to the 7 or 8 million a year that it used to be. We used to be able to pay our per capita based solely on stumpage. So that's how great it used to be. And so as those revenue streams kind of flattened out and even went away, things like corporate dividends and the state revenue sharing. I want to note too, the state revenue sharing on fuels tax is up for this year for renewal. And we understand that it'll go forward as currently in place, and we need to have that done by September. Our understanding that Melissa Schlichting and legal is overseeing that.
She's agreeing with you. She's right behind you.
Yes, and then, of course, we have the alcohol tax revenue sharing. I think that comes up for renewal in a year. These are 10-year agreements. The one that we're really holding some hopes out for is the marijuana tax revenue sharing. That one could be a new additional revenue stream to, help, contribute to the pot that's available to you. Dedicated trust is one that is becoming very significant as the loans get paid back by gaming and energy keepers. We're actually beginning to see the principal grow. You do have to take some special actions to tap dedicated trust. But that one is one I'm excited to see, that I've been around long enough to see it start to come back. The rec permits, thankfully, this is one that was a nice surprise. Rec permits is staying at and above projection for the current year. We worried about, the price change, but it doesn't seem to have transmitted to anything negative. The department still stated conservative for next year because, trying to get a better feel for how that'll trend out in the future. And gaming, as I said, gaming came in big time this year. Twice what we ever received under class 3. Our highest we ever received under class 3 was 3.4. So this year they doubled that. And I also was told informally, EKI was projecting a dividend again. So SK Tech, EKI, and gaming are really forming up some significant contributions to the available amounts to the council to make these appropriation decisions on.
Carol?
One quick question. The reserves, is there an invested reserves and then also a tribal reserve? That's what I think I'm getting those two confused.
Well, Mr. Spar, besides directing all of financial management, originally started with us in cash flow and investment. So he is really my go-to for how all of the unrestricted assets can be invested if they're not in treasury. Treasury balances are managed. I can get to those and look at those. I actually shared this with, people who see the treasury because they have to draw to get us, recouped for our expenses. And so between cash flow and investment and that is, and I literally said, when I show this to the leaders, I'm good, correct? And they assured me that it was good, but that conversation, I believe, has to occur when Greg will give you those
Okay.
investment reports, which I understand are coming about kind of regularly. So, yeah. And then it goes to all of the other, even the federal funds, Carol, we're required to have them at minimum and interest-bearing accounts, but we can't put them at risk. So they're in a pretty conservative class. But tribal funds, there's virtually no restriction on that, but wanting to be, pretty prudent and effective with that.
All right, Ruth, good job.
You bet. Any questions at all? If you like to use Teams, I know Michael does. I see his little footprints in there. So this document is in Teams, and also the recommendations document is in Teams, and also the tribal appropriation recommendation document is in there. And as I said, as soon as I present things to you as the council, I don't, as a matter of practice, just distribute this because we still haven't finalized, but they are free, for you to use if you have a question or just your own, discussion with your constituents. And this is why we avoid a lot of specificity in there, because it would probably, create a lot of questions even I'd have to dig to effectively answer. So.
All right,
Thank
Linda.
you, Una.
Okay, Dan. And at all. You need to be an executive? We'll move into executive session for legal updates.